So the book is called The Challenge of Childhood Diabetes, Family Strategies for Raising a Healthy Child. And we wrote this book because we wanted people to be able to read in about 3 hours, the lessons we had learned in 3 years. It's got inside it a survival guide. So at the end, if you don't have time right away to read the whole book, it's got everything encapsulated, all of our messages. And so we just wanted to offer our story to other people in the hopes that they can get comfortable with the diagnosis more quickly, and that their children can thrive, and that blood sugars can be closer to normal, and it doesn't have to be a roller coaster. So Danny was diagnosed in January of 2002. He was 7, and now he's 13. And it was a complete shock. I mean, I didn't even know what diabetes was. I got the call. All he had was he was wetting his bed. He was drinking an enormous amount of juice, and he just wasn't feeling great. But I thought, well, maybe it's what is that called? Urinary tract infection. Maybe it's something like that. And instead, I get the call. Oh, we think it's diabetes. Can you go right in to Boston? I found that. I said to the doctor, no, it can't be, because I could never give my child a shot. How's that for denial? A year later, I'm given we were up to something like 8 a day. I mean, it was just crazy. My husband and I had no idea what this disease was. And so we went into the hospital, and they spent 2 days and 2 nights teaching us how to do everything you have to do. And then you go home. And you're in charge of your child. You're making decisions. How much insulin, where do you give that shot? How do you give the shot? How many times a night are you going to check them? How many times a day are you going to check them? And you're just in another world. That the first year is the hardest. It gets better. And your whole sense of normal is thrown up in the air, right? It's almost, how you have a baby and then you bring the baby home and you go, what is going on? Well, it's the same, and then it gets better. You do develop a new sense of normal. You get your equilibrium back. You figure out what you need to do, hopefully in some semblance. And so as you talk to people, what I'm interested in doing is easing that learning curve, in finding ways and finding messages and talking with people enough so maybe they don't have to have the rough first year that we did. You can be a great athlete. You can sleep over people's houses. You can go to camp. You can do all those things. And as a newly diagnosed parent, you're like, will my child ever be able to do anything again? You don't know. One of the things that became so clear to me when Danny was diagnosed is that every family situation is so different, and every child is different. You might have 8 children, you might have 2 children with diabetes, you might have 1 parent, you might have health insurance, you might not. That every situation is so, in some ways, painfully different. But what I tried to do was to have people start to think for themselves, just to encourage that. Certainly, just to say, take a breath. Does the advice make sense to you? How can you help yourself? How can you make the situation better in any way for yourself? Does your child react to white bread? Maybe they don't. Would they be willing to eat carrots in the car if there's no other food on the way home? You just start to think creatively about, how are you gonna avoid having, how do you work with your family so they're willing not to have dessert in the house if that's the decision you make? In our family, the only way not to have him eating candy and cookies was to take that out of the house. Now that does not work for everyone. I've met people who the parents are saying, I cannot live without my M&Ms. Well, that's fine, but let's think about then, I'm not saying everybody has to clear their house out of all food, but just, okay, so if that's the decision, now what is going to make life better for your family? Maybe it's, my kid is going to eat M&Ms, but I know he goes up to 300, so we're going to have M&Ms on our walk. Do you know what I mean? We're going to walk into town, or maybe we all need more exercise and we're going to do basketball. So I think what happened to me is I was so passive in the beginning. My kid had a disease I didn't know about. I was scared to death, and I didn't think for myself. I did whatever the doctor told me, and ultimately we weren't getting better. And that's where I felt like saying to parents, okay, everybody, antennas up. Let's pay attention. And whatever your family situation is, there's such a range. It's not do this, do that, but do something. Do what feels good and feels like it's in the right direction. The changes we made in diet have been very controversial at a high level. Actually, even some parents really don't like it, and that's fair. You know, people will say, I ate at McDonald's, my kid eats Burger King, and we don't have a blood sugar problem. Well, all the power to you. My son can't do that. You know, it's really, and as I will say, with our nutritional program that we have, all it is moving to nutrient-rich foods, right? So we're going from white bread to wheat bread. We're going from even white potatoes to sweet potatoes. You know, it has more for you as a person, nutritionally. There have been, like the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, for example, they reviewed the book at the national level. They weren't comfortable with that message. So honestly, there's been a pushback, and there are parents, as I said, that aren't comfortable with it. But there is a large group of people who write to me and say, thank you so much for saying what that little voice inside me has been saying for a long time. You know, I went and I gave a talk at a hospital. Afterward, this woman came up to me, I mean, so teary, just her mascara down her face, about the fact that her daughter's 14. She's had diabetes since she was 10. The blood sugars are out of control. She's never been able to get good control. And she looked at me and said, I know this is the answer. I know this is what we're doing wrong. Why didn't somebody say that food matters? Why did no one tell me that a carb isn't just a carb? I'm like, well, you know what? I think it's politically not that correct, but I'm just saying from my experience, a carb isn't a carb. It might be in other families, it isn't for ours. And so that's where I think, you know, it's hard on a national level for a big group to say, yes, we're going to change we're going to endorse something that isn't the party line. But I think individuals, it's made enough of a difference to individuals that it's really worth still talking about. And I will say, I've had a lot of support from doctors. So I've gotten lovely letters and endorsements from a whole host and range of endocrinologists out there. So it's not that controversial. A lot of people are doing it. They're just not doing it, from what I see, at an educational national level. So when we made the decision to not have computer and TV during the week after school in the house, I know, you know, that's about trusting yourself. I made a decision, you know what, it was working. It wasn't popular in the beginning with either child, but I said, you know what, guys, I've realized that this has just become a habit, and I want you to be well-rounded kids that do a lot of different things. So let's draw, you know, or let's learn a new skill, or let's go outside. And they resisted it, but I'll tell you, it wasn't that long before nobody mentioned it anymore, and we had a lot more things going on, card games, board games, being outside, just family time. And so those are the kind of things that do start to make you trust yourself. But each step we took, I will say, if it didn't work, we went back to the drawing board, but a lot of them worked, and that gave us more trust, you know. For example, we limited media. Now that's not popular if you say to your kid, you know what, when you come home from school, no computer, no TV, we're gonna go out and play. But I realized if the TV and the computer were available, you think he wants to play with mom? But if there's nothing available like that, I say, let's go shoot basketball in the street, or let's go for a walk. Yeah, there's nothing happening in the house that looks better. And so in that way, or I'd say, you know, hey, can you come help me in the yard, or whatever it would be. That's where the ingenuity comes in. If you are not home, how does the kid come home to a vegetable plate? You know, I mean, these things, that's why I'm saying I, in this book, give the best of what I know. But then each parent would have to say, well, maybe I'm going to talk to my daycare provider and say, you know what, I read this book that said that if you eat carrots and celery and cream cheese or whatever it would be after school, he won't be so high. Maybe that daycare provider would provide vegetables. Do you see what I mean? So I don't think any of my ideas are going to fit another family just like that. I think they're all things that you could aim. I wish someone had said to me, let's aim for more fruits and vegetables. What's wrong with that? And then, you know, that's just one example. Or let's aim for more family exercise. And then if you can't do it, you can't do it. And if you can, there might be, if someone's with your child, maybe that person would be willing to do something active and limit media or whatever it would be. So that would be my hope, that this message stimulates people to do whatever is a step in the right direction for them. So I wrote this book with my mother. She's a Boston Globe columnist. She was for 19 years, and she's a good writer. She's written 4 books. So I had the help of my son's grandmother, and we wrote it together from an intergenerational perspective, and it shows the kids, the parents, the grandparents, and then, sort of how hard it was and how good it got, which is really what I wanted to know when my child was diagnosed. What's going to make it better, and will it get better, and those kind of things. So it's been, it's available on Amazon and on barnesandnoble.com and on the online booksellers, and it's also available through our website, which is www.challengeofdiabetes.com.